all know a guy who only occasionally shaves for big occasions, and it's because that occasional shave really hurts. It's the time of year for big occasions, and yet there he is, suffering with that cheap drugstore razor. Let's help him out. Henson Shaving's line of razors, built with aerospace precision, deliver a smooth shave your dad, brother, and even son can enjoy, eventually. With replacement blades just 10 cents each, you'll buy it once, and they'll use it for life. How's that for the perfect gift? Celebrate with 100 free blades on your first purchase, and no subscription headaches. HensonShaving.com/holiday.
Hello and welcome to History for Weirdos.
We're your hosts, Andrew
and Stephanie.
And each week, we're going to take you on a journey into the strange, obscure, and relentlessly entertaining corners of human history.
Now listen up, friends, because it's about to get weird. Hello, weirdos, and welcome to episode number 33 of History for Weirdos.
Welcome back, weirdos.
We are, as always, very excited to be here, and this week is Andrew's week to regale us with a strange tale.
Oh, yes, and strange it is.
I know, I'm really excited because I gave Andrew the idea for this one.
Yes.
Well, kind of. We were in Cabo, in Los Cabos for my birthday. That was my first time there. And of course, what you do when you're on like a luxurious romantic birthday trip in Los Cabos, we were watching the History Channel at night.
Yes, and guys, History Channel After Dark, it's something else if you guys haven't watched it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, you need to watch the History Channel at night because it's so much weirder than anything we could ever talk to you about.
Yeah, that's where like the Ancient Aliens guy, he
like dominates it now.
He dominates it.
It's aliens and pawn shops and strange stories.
It's history adjacent, I'd say.
It's history
ironic
adjacent.
That it's on the History Channel.
Yeah.
History adjacent.
Yeah, it's a distant cousin to history.
Right.
But all that being said, we were laying in the hotel bed just watching History Channel, and this story came, like a brief portion of this story came up in like a larger narrative that we were watching, and I was like, oh my god, this would be such a good episode. I call it. And then like a few days later, Andrew's like, I actually want it. I want that episode.
Yes.
And I don't know why I just gave it up. I feel like it is meant for you, though.
It is. Because there's a lot more to it than we thought.
Yeah. I'd imagine.
That's the weird thing about this is I started looking into it, and there was just a whole life of this guy that was actually very interesting.
Okay. Yeah, I had a feeling there would be a lot to his journey. But we're just teasing them now.
We're teasing you guys.
Without further ado, Andrew, my love, will you tell us what this week's episode is on? Or who it is about?
Readers. Listeners. You're not reading this. You were listening to this. Wow.
You don't read podcasts.
You don't read podcasts. If you could read the words that are coming out of my mouth, like through the radio or whatever you're listening to, that would be pretty cool.
The radio.
I don't know why I said radio. God,
Grandpa, they're listening on an app.
Oh, jeez. Okay. I was going to say I should shut up, but I should actually continue talking.
Yeah, you can't shut up.
I can't shut up. I literally can't shut up. Okay. Well, listeners, not readers. What if I were to tell you that this week's story surrounded a legendary American author who isn't even best known because of his works, but because of some mysterious circumstances around his death?
Dun, dun, dun.
I literally put insert spooky noises here.
Oh my god.
Thank you, babe.
We're like soulmates.
To be fair, he was sort of a weirdo in his own right, and we will definitely get into that. But his death is definitely a very weird event as well. Well, let's introduce author and journalist Ambrose Bierce.
Woohoo! Ambrose Bierce.
Ambrose Bierce. First of all, great name. I love it. As an author, he was known as a satirist and horror writer.
That's an awesome place to start.
Yes, it is. In fact, Kurt Vonnegut wrote that he considered Bierce to be one of the most preeminent horror writers in American history.
Wow.
Yeah, so he was legit. Okay, now that we've gone over a little bit of who he was, I want to go into his backstory.
Please, I'm really excited to learn more about Mr. Ambrose.
Oh, yes. Well, he was born in Ohio in 1842 to one Marcus Aurelius Bierce.
Are you serious?
Yes, I shit you not.
Oh my
His
God.
father's name was literally Marcus Aurelius. Obviously not that Marcus Aurelius, because, that was...
Are you sure?
A couple of thousand years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
And his mom was Laura Sherwood Bierce. And I literally put in my notes, yes, his father's name was literally Marcus Aurelius Bierce.
Only someone named Marcus Aurelius, though, would give their son, like, such a badass name like Ambrose.
I know, and it's interesting because this would not be his only coincidental tie to ancient Rome.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I'll get into that in just a second. But he was raised kind of destitute, and... but despite that, though, his parents instilled in him a deep love for books and literature.
Oh.
Which, of course, would then lead on to the rest of his life.
He becomes a writer.
Yeah, he becomes a writer.
That's so heartwarming.
I know. And I'm like, you especially would love this.
Yes. I'm a big book nerd, you guys.
She's a huge book nerd, y'all.
Big book nerd.
Big writer, too. No big deal. Okay. He left home at the age of 15. And to become what was known as a quote-unquote printer's devil at an abolitionist newspaper called the Northern Indianan.
Damn. At 15?
At 15, yes.
Okay. That's pretty badass.
Pretty badass.
And it was for an abolitionist paper, you said?
It was, yes. And for everyone asking what the hell is a printer's devil, it's essentially an apprentice in a printing establishment who performed a number of tasks such as mixing tubs of ink and fetching type. Some notable printer's devils from history, especially American history, have included Benjamin Franklin, Walt Whitman, and even Mark Twain.
I didn't know that about Walt Whitman and Mark Twain. I did know the term because of good old Ben.
Really?
Yeah.
That was the first time I've ever heard of that term.
When I was a kid and we were learning about like U.S. history and stuff like that, I didn't obviously there's like a modern version, but right. I remember thinking to myself that I wanted to be a printer's apprentice. Oh. But, we don't live in the...
We don't live in the 19th century.
But that's what little me wanted to do. I was like, oh my God, like they actually make the books. Like I thought that was the coolest thing.
Sweet. Mm-hmm. You should have worked for like Penguin Publishing or something like that.
I know, next time.
In the next life?
Next incarnation.
Okay, cool.
Absolutely.
Good, I'll remind you. Okay, so at 19 years of age, our boy Ambrose enlisted in the Union Army's 9th Indiana Infantry and participated in one of the first land battles of the Civil War, the Battle of Philippi.
Oh, snap.
And guess what? Remember how I said there was another tie to ancient Rome? Mm-hmm. Fun fact, there was another Battle of Philippi about 2,000 years prior where the forces of Mark Antony and Octavian defeated the forces who were led by the assassins of none other than Julius Caesar.
Yep.
It was pretty climactic battle, actually.
And Octavian is Augustus.
Yes, Octavian would become Augustus, the first emperor of Rome.
That's crazy. This dude has a lot of interesting ties to an ancient world so far.
Yeah, I mean, sadly, those are the only two that at least I know of.
Yeah, but
I just thought that was kind of weird. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you didn't know, well, now you know.
Now you know.
Now you know. He would actually receive some media attention for his heroics in the next battle he participated in, called the Battle of Rich Mountain, for saving an injured comrade.
Really?
Yeah.
That's so sweet.
I know, isn't it?
I'm loving this Ambrose.
Yeah, and in fact, and you're going to love him even more, his experience at the Battle of Shiloh, which was probably one of the biggest battles in the Civil War, the American Civil War, obviously. His experiences in that battle would inspire future works about the horrors of war and his kind of anti-war sentiments.
Good.
Yeah.
I have anti-war sentiments as well, listeners.
Yes.
I think I've made that clear probably in previous episodes, but let's just put all the cards on the table. I have anti-war sentiments.
And it's so strange because I have pro-war sentiments. I'm kidding, guys. I'm kidding. I don't. I just wanted to say that. Okay, well, back to the story. To add to Ambrose's distaste of war, he eventually sustained a traumatic brain injury in June of 1864, which kind of... Well, actually, let me just read what I wrote. And now, I'm not saying that this absolutely caused his future love of black humor, but I wouldn't necessarily be surprised that, this event greatly influenced it.
Was his TBI in his prefrontal cortex?
Babe, this is from the 19th century. This was literally the Civil War. I don't think they knew.
Was it in the front part of his head?
They didn't have it just said his head. Like, they didn't have PETs and stuff back then.
I know, but it's the front of your head. Was it at the front of his head?
I'm pretty sure it was.
Okay. That affects personality loosely, right?
Loosely, right.
That's the general sense of, it's the last part of our brains that finishes developing, and it's a lot of like core aspects of our personality, such as temperament and humor and things like that. So that's why I thought maybe his prefrontal cortex was damaged.
Yeah, it could have been. And it makes sense. Yeah, he's a satirist. He wrote like a lot of themes about death.
Interesting. So it could be the brain injury, or it could be or like not mutually exclusive, the experience of the horrors of war.
Right.
Yeah.
Could be, a combination. I mean, also just the Civil War was just bloody and awful.
Yeah, I can't imagine having to participate
in
that.
Any war is, but like in American history, like the Civil War is just awful.
Yeah. Civil wars, I'd imagine, all over the world are just so heartbreaking because it's you're fighting your own people.
Right, exactly.
Like, that can't feel great.
No, it really can't. Well, he was eventually discharged from the Army in 1865, the last year of the Civil War, but he re-enlisted the following year in 66 when he joined General Hazen as a part of an expedition to inspect military outposts across the Great Plains.
Okay.
Yeah, and the expedition traveled by horseback and wagon from Omaha, Nebraska, and arrived at the end of the year in San Francisco.
That's a fun trip. I mean, probably not for them, now that I'm thinking about it. The lack of hygiene and food and stuff, maybe.
Yeah.
But that's a really cool road trip.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. I mean, he traveled across the country, saw a lot of stuff, and, and he would eventually, or not eventually, like, he would, live for like the rest of his life, like, mostly in San Francisco.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, not exclusively, but mostly.
Yeah.
And this is when he started, really started writing.
Yay, Ambrose!
And, as a writer, Stephanie, I am sure that this part really interests you.
Stop telling them that.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah, guys, she's a writer.
No.
Anyways, he contributed to periodicals, most often one simply called The Newsletter, and he eventually even became an editor of this in 1868.
Very cool.
Yes, and around this time he wrote his first story, The Haunted Valley, and in the same year married a woman named Mary Ellen Day.
Nice.
Yes.
Good year for him.
They would have 3 kids together, but sadly he would outlive 2 of them.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Strangely, they would separate around 17 years later, but wouldn't actually get divorced for another 16 years after that.
It must have been really rare to get divorced.
Yeah.
Right? That must have... It's not even like, oh, we're putting this off. I wonder if that was even like much of an option.
Yeah.
If it even really crossed their minds. We don't know why they separated?
Yeah, I didn't write in my notes, but I just remember reading that he found some like kind of sus like letters from like an admirer. Not necessarily like, She was
getting love letters?
Yeah, I don't think it was necessarily reciprocated, but like she was keeping them. I don't know. I think he was a little sussed out, as the Utes would say these days.
Yeah.
And ironically, to bring up ancient Rome again, like Julius Caesar, the reason why he divorced his second wife was because, it was a similar situation, funny enough. And he said the wife of Caesar must be above suspicion.
Oh my god.
Kind of a dick move. As much as I love Julius Caesar, that's a little bit of a dick move.
Did Ambrose and his wife separate after the death of their children? Do you know?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't look into... He didn't... Like, she wasn't really...
a big part of his story.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was just strange because they were together for like 16 years.
Wow.
And like married for over 30, right?
Yeah.
Even though they were separated for half of that.
That's so crazy. And they had 3 children together.
And they had 3 children together.
But she's kind of like a footnote.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But yeah, and sadly, it was 2 sons and 1 daughter, and he outlived the 2 sons.
Wow. What a heartache.
Yeah. One killed himself, and 1 died of alcoholism.
Oh my god.
So it was really horrible.
Terrible ways to lose your loved ones. Those are really traumatic forms of grief.
Yeah.
Poor Ambrose.
Yeah.
So he leaves.
Yeah.
His wife.
Well, you know what? Marital issues aside.
He
eventually moved to England, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, from 1872 to 1875, and he wrote his first book, The Fiend's Delight.
Okay, that sounds really uplifting.
Uplifting, yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Like death, black humor.
I like it.
Yeah, and that was his thing.
Kind of dark, gritty.
I mean, Kurt Vonnegut liked him.
Right, so.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He eventually moved back to San Francisco in 1875, and continued to write. And interestingly, for a brief time, he tried to become a manager of a mining operation in like the Dakota Territory. Oh. But needless to say, it didn't really work out.
Yeah, that's so random. Okay.
So random. And at some point in the 1880s, however, it's when he started working at the San Francisco Examiner, a newspaper run by none other than William Randolph Hearst.
Damn, he's got a castle, you guys.
Yeah, he has a castle still to this day in California, by the way, in like the Central Coast.
Big newspaper, hotshot.
Like, by today's standards, he'd be like a multi-billionaire.
Yeah. Super big deal, bougie dude.
Yeah, he was even thinking about running for president around like the turn of the century.
Yes.
Like big deal. And because of the exposure he got from the newspaper, he quickly became an icon of writing on the West Coast.
Yay!
Like he was a big deal.
Wow, like to have success in his life, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Because I had not heard of him as a writer. When you were telling the story, I assumed that it was in retrospect. People were like, "Oh, he was good."
Yeah, that's the crazy thing. I'll get to that. There's a secondary aspect of that.
Okay.
So, and he would remain associated with Hearst in the newspaper all the way up until 1909. So for like decades, right? And and it's funny that you mentioned that because like literally the next thing in my notes is like it's important to mention that during his time, he published dozens of works under the categories of like psychological thrillers, war stories, and science fiction. There's literally like just too many to mention, like dozens and dozens. And then posthumously, he had so many works published.
Wow.
But in his day, like he was more known as a journalist.
Okay.
Like that's what he was known for. Like, yeah, he wrote these things and like he was kind of known, but it was the journalism and like the writing for the newspaper was like how he was really known.
Interesting.
And it was only until retrospect or now where he's really known as a writer for those works.
I would imagine that those things like science fiction and psychological thrillers and dark humor in general would have been ahead of his time. Right.
In fact, he inspired the guy who, and I don't know, and I'm sorry, I didn't write in my notes, but like I forgot his name, but he inspired the guy who inspired H.P. Lovecraft.
Oh, dang.
Yeah, so he was really ahead of his time.
Yeah, really ahead of his time.
Like he was kind of a forerunner, of that genre.
Okay.
It's, like he just wrote so many works and it's kind of insane. Kind of to wrap that thing up. So a little of a side, and I have to go back a little bit to explain kind of like what's like the next step in the narrative.
Okay.
So in the 1860s, the U.S. government had given out low interest loans to the Union Pacific and the Central Pacific Railroad companies to create the first transcontinental railroad, right? I think we all know about that. The Golden Spike.
I remember.
Yeah,
I was there.
Yeah, you were there. It's just like one of those random things that I actually remember learning from like elementary school.
Yeah. They made it a big deal.
They made it a huge deal. I mean, and it was for the time. It was a huge deal. I mean, in the age of the internet now and like airplanes and everything, it's not. But, funny enough, the Union Pacific Railroad still exists.
And for them, this would have been like such a big leap towards like modernization and the future.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly how they saw it. And, as the name implies, this railroad literally connected the country, right?
Very well named.
From, east to west.
I like it.
Yeah, right? Very, very straight to the point. You get it what it's doing. So, but with any sort of loan, you're supposed to pay back that money. And this was, of course, no exception.
This is Finance 101
Finance 101, right?
When you take out a loan, you are expected to pay back the money. That's what you're saying?
Yes.
Interesting.
I know,
okay.
Crazy.
Write that down, weirdos. Write it down.
Write that down. And so now that I've kind of explained that, this leads us back to the narrative in 1895.
Okay.
So Collis P. Huntington, an executive at Central Pacific Railroad Company, had convinced a member of Congress, and I did some more research and digging on this. There's a strong inclination that he actually bribed this member of Congress.
That's what I thought.
Of course, right. To forgive the remaining balance on the loans that that were given to the railroad companies. And by the way, like the railroad was completed in 1869. This is 1895. So this is like, already like 25 plus years since. There was a whopping $130 million left on the balance, which, by the way, converted to today's dollars, is around, actually a little bit over $4.1 billion in today's money.
Did they forgive the loan?
I'll get to that. It's not chump change.
Yeah, it's not chump change. Got it.
It's not chump change. So, since the companies, they were raking in dough, they had received these loans at lower interest than like what the common person could get, right?
Of course, yeah.
There's very low interest loans, and this deal, and essentially, this deal in Congress would have been, had to have been kept low key because it would have been immensely unpopular, immensely, and you probably know where this is headed. So Bierce headed to Washington in January of 1896. And at the behest of William Randolph Hearst to confront these railroad magnates.
Ooh, as a journalist he went?
Yes, as a journalist.
He went to get the scoop?
I literally wrote that.
Really?
Yes, I said, and I'll quote exactly what I wrote. The railroad magnates who were trying to push this through Congress and to get the scoop.
Ew, we spend too much time together.
We do. It's upsetting. So this obviously did not sit well with Huntington because, he was like there to expose this essentially like shady dealings, right?
Backdoor deal,
and essentially corruption.
Yeah.
And as Americans, that's like one thing like we can all agree on is like corruption is bad, right? Like that's like our core part of our DNA.
Yeah.
Corruption is really bad. And basically Huntington just straight up tried to bribe him, asked him like how much would it cost to keep him quiet. Bierce, the badass he is, replied with, "My price is $130 million. If, when you are ready to pay, I happen to be out of town, you may hand it over to my friend, the Treasurer of the United States."
Wow. Yeah. What integrity.
The freaking integrity.
What
and he
sass.
became a national sensation because of this.
I'm sure.
And he stirred up just so much like just animosity towards these railroad magnates, right? These railroad companies, that the bill was just, eventually defeated that year, and he returned, and he stayed most of the year in Washington of 1896, and he would return back to San Francisco in November of that year. So it was like a big deal.
Yeah, screw the railroad companies, man. Cancel student loan debt.
I know. I'm like, that's like the only type of debt where I'm like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Actually.
Yes.
Yeah. Bierce would eventually re-enter the national spotlight again very soon, interestingly enough.
Okay.
This time not as much in a positive light. And I'll get to that.
No.
Don't worry, I'll get to this. Long story short, he wrote a poem in 1900 regarding the assassination of William Goebel in the same year. He was the governor of... God, I can't believe I didn't write this down. I think it was like Ohio or Kentucky, and I'm sorry, listeners, I don't remember which one it was, but it's one of those kind of like the states that are kind of like in the Midwest, but like kind of in the Northwest of the Midwest.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's Ohio, but don't quote me on that.
This governor was assassinated?
He was assassinated. It really doesn't matter like which state he was, but I should have written that down, and I didn't. The general tone was that of dismay, like in the poem, right? The general tone was dismay and fear. But in it, he just happened to mention, President William McKinley.
Okay.
And, well, McKinley was assassinated the following year in 1901. Yes. And a lot of William Randolph Hearst's political opponents and rivals blamed the poem for inciting the assassin.
No.
Yeah, which is ludicrous, by the way, in case you guys...
Dude, it's like the Beatles and Helter Skelter.
Yes.
With the Manson murders.
Right,
That's
like
not
it's absurd. It's like, no, it's not. Like, stop.
Like, it's just a freaky coincidence.
Yeah, exactly. And he just mentioned, like...
And saying something does not force another person to take human life, right? Saying something that you didn't even direct at this human.
Right. And
you just created art.
He just... And, like, the point of this poem, too, was, like, to say... and William McKinley was just the president at the time. So it was just say, like... Oh, this reaches, like, the highest echelons, right, of government.
Like,
right?
This is so sad. Everyone's sad.
And it wasn't, it wasn't like a call to assassinate the president of the United States.
Oh my God.
But,
and Hearst is his boss.
And Hearst is his boss, so, like, the buck stops there.
Yeah.
So his reputation, Hearst, took a big hit. I mean, I'm assuming Bierce's did as well.
Yeah.
But, Bierce was still highly regarded as a writer of the time, and, Hearst kept him on as a writer.
Wow. I'm really surprised.
He didn't fire him.
I'm really, really surprised.
Yeah. And it's I mentioned this earlier, but I really want to mention it again that, I haven't really mentioned too many of his literary works because there are just so many, and it's just insane. There's too many to recount. It's ironic that more of his works were published posthumously, as opposed to
in his lifetime.
In his life, and it reminds me of my boy Tupac Shakur, who had more work published posthumously, and beautiful poetry.
There's a book of poems by Tupac that I got to read in my graduate program at Columbia.
That's so cool.
They were really good.
That must have been like the most amazing poetry class ever.
It wasn't a poetry class.
Oh yeah, it wasn't a poetry class. Yeah,
but it was a part of our curriculum, and I was so happy. And
Which
it was
class
really good.
was it?
I don't remember.
Good talk.
I was a really good student.
Yeah, I know. This was in Columbia, by the way, like an Ivy League school.
I don't remember the names of the classes, you guys.
You just showed up somehow and got great grades. I don't know how.
Thanks, babe. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay.
But back to Bierce.
And now we are, listeners, arriving to the very interesting and climax of the story, if you will.
As I say in our intro, it's about to get weird. Am I right?
It's about to get weird.
Yeah.
Yes. So here's what we know. 1913. Bierce was interested in what was happening with the Mexican Revolutionary War, and he packed some bags, saddled his horse, and took off.
Wow, just like on his own?
He's in his 70s, by the way, I should mention, at this point.
Oh my god, you're right, he is in his 70s.
He's old as hell. Like, this guy, it's 1913, he fought in the Civil War.
Oh my god.
Which was in the 1860s.
And he's like, you know what? I want to see what they're doing.
Yeah, like, I fought in the war. Like, screw it, let's do it. He crossed through El Paso, Texas into Ciudad Juarez and joined Pancho Villa's army as a journalist/observer.
Hey,
Pancho Villa!
Homie.
He even witnessed the Battle of Tierra Blanca, which was a major victory for Pancho Villa.
Yeah.
Kind of a big deal in the Mexican Revolutionary War. I'm not going to get too much into it because
we've
not
discussed
part of the story.
it in a previous episode.
We did.
On
Las Adelitas.
Las Adelitas. It was a very complicated war.
It was
with
lots of multiple sides,
lots of factions, lots of like guerrilla fighting. Really interesting, though.
Yeah, very interesting, very complex. Much more complex than our Civil War or Revolutionary War. I feel like those were more kind of
very like this side, that side.
Yeah, of course you had like factions within this side, but they're all kind of united, at least in the war part of it. Right? Anyways, his last known correspondence was shortly after, and this is where it's kind of like there's multiple accounts of what his actual last correspondence were. So cool. One of them was to his fellow journalist and friend, Blanche Partington.
Oh my god, that's another amazing old-timey name.
I know, Blanche. In the letter, he closed it by saying, "As to me, I leave here tomorrow for an unknown destination."
Ooh.
Spooky. It's possible his other last words were, "Goodbye. If you hear of my being stood up against a Mexican stone wall and shot to rags, please know that I think it is a pretty good way to depart this life. It beats old age, disease, or falling down the cellar stairs. To be a gringo in Mexico, that is euthanasia."
That's incredible. I really hope it was that one.
I know.
Oh my God.
To be a gringo in Mexico, even today, it kind of like...
Hell yeah, that's the way to go out.
That's the way to go out. See, way. Sorry to my Mexican listeners.
Yeah, that dude knew what was up, though.
Yeah. And from here, he just straight up disappears.
So he says one of those two things in a letter.
I found a third one, but it was like from like a really like... I couldn't find any other like articles or anything listing it, so I just didn't even include it. But there was also a third one, possibly.
He says one of those two things and then just goes dark.
Yeah, and just goes dark.
Okay. In his 70s in Mexico during the Revolutionary War.
Yes.
Okay.
But here's the kicker. There are dozens, and I mean dozens, of contrasting and differing reports on his whereabouts and his ultimate fate.
Okay.
And they're all over the place. I mean, all over the place. like both figuratively and literally.
Well, you would think that an old American man hanging out with Pancho Villa and his guys and ladies would stand out.
Right, and he did, but he didn't at the same time. So we're going to start with my personal favorite theory, and this comes from the Ancient Aliens on History Channel.
Yes!
Or as I like to call it, like I mentioned earlier, History Channel After Dark.
Honestly, it's the best.
So, listeners, take this as you will. Mm-hmm. Essentially, the story goes like this. He wanders or investigates the Zona del Silencio, aka the Mapimi Silent Zone, located in the Mapimi Basin. Mm-hmm. And this is an area where radio signals don't work, by the way, hence the name Zone of Silence. Mm-hmm. And it is here that he encountered some strange space-time anomaly and just straight up vanished into thin air.
How do we know that he encountered a weird... Oh, just because he vanished?
He just vanished.
That's the space-time anomaly?
Yeah, or aliens or something.
Okay, cool.
And just to be clear to everyone, because I don't want my words misconstrued, I don't believe this for 1 second, but I wanted to
Tomato.
I wanted to mention it because it's simply amazing and hilarious. But that is one theory, and I don't believe it.
I believe it.
Okay, back to some possibilities that actually have some credibility. Mm-hmm. Some thought his disappearance was simply an act and meant to cloak his either suicide or being committed to a sanatorium.
No! Aliens!
I know, that was the least fun one, honestly, in my opinion. Others thought he died in the town of Sierra Mojada in the Chihuahua Desert. Mm-hmm. In fact, there's even a cenotaph for him there, which is essentially a big grave, but for, that doesn't include a body. Like a big monument, I guess, in a way. Mm-hmm. Like a monument. He possibly could have even died at the Battle of Ojinaga, fighting against federal forces alongside Pancho Villa.
Yeah, I like that.
And, this one has some plausibility because if this was the case, it would have been hard to identify him because all bodies were burned immediately after from both sides, simply because there was a typhoid outbreak.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. They didn't
want
disease to spread.
Yeah, they didn't want any disease to spread.
And they didn't want them to turn into White Walkers.
Oh, that too.
Yeah.
That too.
Let's be accurate here.
We're all about accuracy here. But other folks said he survived this battle and actually made it back to the United States.
Okay.
And even helped a former federal troop along the way. And somehow died maybe at some point along this treacherous route.
Okay.
Crossing the Rio Grande. Other stories recounted him being executed by federal troops in numerous locations. There's dozens. There's at least a few different stories of him being executed in different fashions in many different places. Mm-hmm.
The feds would do that.
And to wrap this up, I'm going to end it with my second personal favorite.
Okay.
Because this one I think is even more absurd than my personal favorite.
What?
Yes. I'm going to tell you. One account says that he didn't actually die in Mexico. He traveled southward into, South America, and as he once said, he wanted to go to South America. Mm-hmm. So that's plausible,
yeah,
right?
He's like, oh, I want to go there.
But this is where it gets a little bit not plausible.
Okay.
He found an age reversal serum and continued writing as a journalist, Francisco Goldman, who, by the way, is still alive to this day.
Oh my God, let's call him.
Yeah. Again, I'm gonna put my money that this isn't real.
Okay,
as well.
okay, but listen.
Okay. Escúchame, or díceme. Dígame, whatever.
Dígame. Dígame. Escucha. The Spaniards, Los Españoles, they were looking for that Fountain of Youth thing.
Oh.
And they were like, maybe Florida, because it's really weird here. Weird things happen. This is where it would be, right?
They were right about that.
But what if
I love you Floridians, by the way.
Yes. What if our boy Ambrose found it somewhere in South America and he's alive?
And he's alive to this day.
Writing. Doing what he loves. Andrew's just no. Not even a little bit.
Not even a little bit.
What if we call this guy, though?
I kind of do want to call him and just to see, what his reaction would be.
Yeah, let's just ask. What if no one's ever asked him?
Because and he's like, yeah,
stupid.
that is me.
Yeah.
And it would be like, wait, what? You'd be like, yeah. Just no one's asked because that's so absurd.
Yeah, exactly.
And then he leads us to the Fountain of Youth.
Oh my God.
Okay, that would be the most amazing weirdo story of all time.
Yeah,
we would be like weirdos in future History for Weirdos episodes.
Exactly.
God, that is
meta.
Oh
my God. So yeah, I remember, we must have been watching Ancient Aliens, because I remember them saying that this old, like, American dude was hanging out with Pancho Villa and just, like, disappeared. And I was like, I don't even know what they're talking about, but that's an episode right there.
And it turned out it was way more of an episode than I thought. Like, he was an absolute weirdo in his own right, even up until disappearing in the most bizarre fashion.
Of course, like, how beautifully appropriate that he would disappear in like kind of a sci-fi mystery way.
Right, absolutely.
Whether or not he was executed or died fighting or whatever, those things are also very like heroic and romantic and interesting, but the fact that there's this shroud of like aliens.
Yeah, and he was kind of like an early science fiction writer as well.
That's so cool. I'm sure he's happy with this.
I think so too. Yeah. Wherever you are, Ambrose, I'm sure you're happy.
Yeah.
But, there you have it. That is the life and mysterious end of the weirdo Ambrose Bierce.
Amazing. Yay!
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm bowing to everyone listening here. So, before I forget, cite my sources, Encyclopedia Britannica, because, of course, they're actually pretty good lately. I've been using them a lot.
Me too.
The LA Times actually had a great article about him.
Cool.
Time Magazine, online. Poetry Foundation.
Hell yeah. Poets.
The Paris Review.
Oh, cool.
And, of course, our personal favorite.
Wikipedia.
There you go. I didn't even need to say it. You said it.
Yes. Thank you so much, babe.
That was
a great episode. I learned so much, and it touched on so many different things. Like,
I know, right?
Literally from the U.S. Civil War to the Mexican Revolutionary War to corruption and bribery.
Like and quintessential Gilded Age America.
Yeah, and travel and trains and poetry and aliens. This had it all.
It really did, yeah. And that was, like, to be honest, guys, like, when I was researching him, I went in thinking, like, oh, I'm going to research his disappearance and focus on that. And then I saw his life, and I was like, oh my God, this guy is incredible.
What a cool dude.
And he ties to ancient Rome, which, obviously for me, that is everything.
That's how you know this one was meant for you.
This one was meant for me. I mean, his dad was named Marcus Aurelius. Like, I want to name our son Marcus Aurelius.
Okay, so that is the wrap of this week's episode. Thank you, as always, for listening. Weirdos, please rate us, review us, subscribe to us, all of those good things. Find us on Instagram at History4Weirdos, where we can connect. Thank you so much for all the support. As always, you all are amazing. Like, we're honestly so grateful. And it's the messages and the comments and the listening, right? Like, we see the people listening that keeps us going. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you guys. And just to give you guys a little bit of an update, I was checking our analytics earlier today, we've only been tracking this since September, right? We've been around since the beginning of, 2021? Or no, 2020. 2020. Yes.
And then we took a hiatus during like the height of the pandemic, and we moved and all these things.
Yes.
But we've only been tracking the podcast analytics since
September of
2021.
Mm-hmm. And we hit over 60,000 total listens.
Yay!
I know that it's absolutely like mind-blowing to me. So thank you guys so much.
Yes, thank you for being on this journey with us. We love updating you all, and we can't wait to see where this continues to go, hopefully.
Absolutely. Well, until next time, weirdos.
Thank you, weirdos.
Adios.
We all know a guy who only occasionally shaves for big occasions, and it's because that occasional shave really hurts. It's the time of year for big occasions, and yet there he is, suffering with that cheap drugstore razor. Let's help him out. Henson Shaving's line of razors, built with aerospace precision, deliver a smooth shave your dad, brother, and even son can enjoy, eventually. With replacement blades just 10 cents each, you'll buy it once, and they'll use it for life. How's that for the perfect gift? Celebrate with 100 free blades on your first purchase, and no subscription headaches. HensonShaving.com/holiday.
Don't forget that your skin is your largest organ, and the sun can be your skin's worst enemy. Dermatologist recommended Neutrogena products offer the ultimate protection for your skin. From makeup remover wipes to Hydro Boost Water Gel Facial Moisturizer, BJ's has your entire lineup of Neutrogena skincare products. And now through December 3rd, save $4 on any Neutrogena product at BJ's. Love your skin back and save now through December 3rd, only at BJ's.